Good afternoon. Welcome to the Craig Green panel. We're a little bit late because these two in the middle here have just been at the show. Everybody is very excited. So, Matt, if you'd like to start the introductions.
My name is Matthew Williams, and I'm an art director and creative director.
My name is Dan Thawley, and I'm the editor-in-chief of A Magazine, curated by in Paris.
My name is Rob Meyers, and I work as a freelance art and creative director.
So, Dan, if you'd like to, tell us that everybody's been talking about how fantastic the show was. Just give us your synopsis.
I think this is probably the very first show Craig's done without the support of the Man Catwalk platforms, so it was a little bit different. I think we're used to seeing what he does from a little bit further away as well. We were in quite an intimate show space, so it was quite interesting from that point of view straight away, and it was actually quite emotional for a lot of people, this show. I am someone who doesn't know his work so well, but I've been at one or two shows before, but I think there was a lot of people that were good friends of his and following it very closely that were very excited to see it like this. So it was, I think everyone got a bit swept up in that, and it was wonderful, really close up. He showed no print, which was something that was kind of inflected throughout his last few collections. It was very, very clean, but he used so many other techniques to add sort of complexity and interest to his silhouettes. So it was lovely.
Yeah.
Carry on, sorry.
No, it's fine. You go next.
No, I was going to say, it was one of those things, what you were saying about being very personal. There was so many of us. Craig was, I think, a year or 2 years behind me at St. Martin's. So we were all kind of, it's so nice to see your peers and generation, and like kind of your generation kind of producing something that garners such excitement, and it really was. It felt, the build up to it as well, there's such a buzz around Craig anyway, and then for it to walk out and not to be Prince, everyone was expecting, like, it's kind of like huge, and it was perfect.
I think as well, he's become quite known for placing sculpture onto his clothes, and he did it very well this time. It wasn't overbearing. He placed it behind the body most of the time, and I think it added to this kind of almost post-apocalyptic mood that I felt in the collection. I don't know if we're going to look at the pictures shortly to show everybody what we're talking about, but there was a lot of beautiful different colors of blues that he used in completely monochrome silhouettes, and it was all sort of tied together like surgical scrubs, and quite a Japanese vibe to it. There was a lot of sort of split backs and wrapped trousers, and everything was kind of trailing along in quite a romantic way.
Yeah, it seemed much less masculine than the last show.
I suppose that's to do with, as well, a lot of those keyhole jersey looks that he showed too, with he was exposing a different kind of erogenous zone on the body, like the lower abdomen or parts of the shoulders, and those looks with the sort of high-waisted trousers were quite body conscious in a way, but then he kind of countered that with these very large volumes, but they weren't that kind of block structure that he'd been working on. It was a little bit more flyaway, which was nice, and he showed some skin, which before I think I saw a lot of very square tunic layers and proportion going down the body, but this had a lot more action, sort of crossing and bisecting and asymmetrical.
And Matt, Craig Green's a bit of a new designer for you.
Yeah, I just met him at the luncheon we had for him last week. So, but from what I've seen, it's really amazing and sculptural. I haven't seen any images from the show that happened today. It would be cool to bring some up.
You were saying you saw the pieces in Dover Street Market the other day. What did
Yesterday, yeah. It was really strong.
Was that this? It's the collection that a few of the people were wearing at the lunch, like this kind of tie-dye?
Yeah, well actually it looked more like it was like a harness, like a black harness, and like a black
autumn winter
pullover shirt with kind of straps on the side, and it was good. They only had 4 pieces, but
he's done the window, right?
I liked all of it. I
Was
think
there
the window
still
was something
big
like
octopus?
some blue.
Yeah.
Did he do that?
Yeah, he's done this kind of insane giant octopus that was kind of the same color as that collection. Do you know more about the octopus?
No, I don't. I didn't even know he was in the window.
Yeah.
What do we think, just to go, what do we think, because I know he's struggled a little bit with the sculptural thing, struggled with people not understanding what was the clothes and what wasn't the clothes. What do you think to people showing not just the fashion on the catwalk?
I think it's the designer's choice, you know. If that adds to the story of the clothing, I think it's amazing, you know. Some of my favorite fashion shows, you know, it's like a piece that, like Gaultier or Mugler shows, you know, those dresses are just made to order, if ever made, like, but they're so important and add to like the fantasy of the whole entire brand and moment. And I personally am a big fan of designers and artists that incorporate sculpture into their clothing, you know, because it just brings such life and also, you know, theater to the show too, you know, and energy.
And as long as it doesn't end up too gimmicky, I mean, I think he could have been on the edge of it becoming a gimmick, but this show proved that it completely made sense with the rest of what he was doing.
Yeah, it was so nice to completely strip it back. I mean, we've previously spoken about this with, when it comes to things like that, it's about the peak of your pyramid. You know, it's about when it walks out on the catwalk, it's about a feeling and an emotion and like showcasing everything in 4 to 6 minutes, you know, like and then it's about how it trickles down commercially and what you create for in-store. And I think that's the exciting thing to see when you get the peak of the pyramid that has, you know, sculptural, and then you realize that the pieces that sit with it, the actual collection, are beautiful as well. You know?
What I think is kind of interesting about him is the designs don't come from, you're not buying into Craig Green. I mean, you might be buying into him, but you're not buying into his, he's spoken a little bit about how he doesn't want to be a celebrity. Like, you're not, but, you know, I love designers who live but it seems like it comes from some different plane. It's not, you know, it's not like a set up lifestyle that you're buying into. You're buying something else. Do you know what I mean? Like you're buying the artistry of it, or...
I think there's such a simplicity to it. It feels like it's got that whole Yoji thing about it. You know, that's very kind of like, you're not buying, as much as there have been seasonal statements so far, it very much feels like a wardrobe as opposed to, you know, you're buying autumn, winter, or you're buying spring, summer. I feel like Craig is definitely one of these designers that when you buy into it, you feel like you're buying a piece for your wardrobe as opposed to a seasonal piece.
London can be very, very thematic collection-wise. People really believe they need to go to the nth degree to one particular theme each season, and it changes so dramatically from one to the other. And I guess what you're saying is that he kind of makes an evolution through the clothes, which works. And yeah, it's true, it doesn't have some sort of subcultural context as much, but it has a design freedom to it, which very much, does make sense with Yoji.
Yeah, I think, definitely when I saw it walk the day, especially with the pieces cut, it felt like 90s androgynous, kind of like, had like a feeling of like Helmut Lang about it.
Can we pull some of the images up on the screen?
Yeah, it's a good time to do that.
Yeah, I definitely see the Helmut Lang.
Everybody's
Also with bare feet on the catwalk like that.
The Helmut Lang is like a buzz at the moment. 90s Helmut Lang.
I know.
It will always be a buzz, but yes, there's a lot of derivation.
I just see like peers of mine wearing it a lot too. Like,
I thought the bare feet was very fresh after all of the ridiculous constructed sandals that we've seen on a lot of the runways this week.
They're glued together last minute.
I thought it was really honest, because I don't think every designer needs to be a shoe designer at the same time.
Yeah.
And a lot of them also do mediocre collaborations and things too, which I thought, just do what you do and do it well, so good on him for that. But as you can see here, those...
I mean, it's still him though. Like, I hate... It's really, one thing that's terrible about our world is we always define new things from things that happened in the past. So like, although there is elements of like Helmut in some of those cutouts and shapes and like the proportions of the baggy pants with those skin tight shirts, it really feels new and fresh and his own visual language, you know? So it's really, really beautiful.
There's a lot of ethnic references in there as well. I think that could be traced across Asia and all these kind of Thai wrap-around wader trousers and the quite Japanese. A lot of the tops as well. That's kind of a sort of samurai.
The vertical stitching and
exactly
those tops.
Well, Japan is also. There's something going on. I mean, Matt, we were talking about this when I bumped into you in the street the other day. Just there's a lot of, and Astrid was also doing it. There's something's going on with Japan right now.
Even McQueen yesterday, the sort of swirls across all of the coats and things were all apparently sort of giant blown up kabuki masks. So there was that inflection there too.
That blue's fantastic.
I'm always a fan of garments that you can tie up and sort of maneuver via straps and that kind of way of wearing things as a closed jacket or open and flying away. And these have that real straight jacket vibe to them,
It looks amazing on the trousers. It looks so, like when it walked with all the kind of...
So they're all split down the sides, a lot of those trousers, and they've got sort of aprons down the front or sort of patched different layers of denim.
I mean, that's one thing I like about those Japanese designers like Yohji and Issey-Miyake is like, they're really timeless pieces you can wear for like your life, you know? I know if I buy something from Issey-Miyake or Yohji, I'm gonna like it forever. And anyone can just throw this on and...
I mean, many of these are very exaggerated versions of that, aren't they? But I think you could see through how he developed that silhouette that there were pieces in there that were much more wearable, and there was kind of a straight wide jean in there and then some beautiful long shirts.
It's cool. I like the how he's shown the color palette too, this like strong blue. It's almost like a Bedouin society that like dyed blue.
It felt like dropping ink into water. You know, when you drop...
He called it chemical.
Yeah, like it kind of had those really dark spots and like the fade in and fade out. So it was just so nice.
I think we've seen so much denim reworked over London over the past 3 days. A lot of people turning to this more like raw bull denim, and I think he did it in quite a different way to everybody else. I was glad not to see pinstripes in this show but he did the striped quilting, which in a way was his translation of that perhaps.
So like, did he speak about the framework behind the last model of each kind of color palette? Like, did anybody?
Well, the press release talked about this kind of idea of cults and communities, so I think perhaps they were kind of like the signpost leaders, the heralds of each of his little tribes. They all had these kind of wild sails kind of sort of skating out behind, and they looked, like I said earlier, they're sort of very post-apocalyptic, like these were kind of, I don't know, some sort of oriental soldiers emerging after a battle or something like that.
Well, that primitive cult thing, sort of, also Liam Hodges sort of touched on that as well.
Definitely. This felt much more pure and less sort of referential to recent history, though. This is very kind of almost medieval, I suppose. It could have been Chinese clay soldiers or something like that.
Where do these clothes fit in? Because for me, they don't reference much else that's out there. You know, that you'd be whatever you wore this with would be, you'd be obviously adding to your normal wardrobe. Well, maybe not you, Rob.
Could you tell us what is that a kimono piece?
Yeah, it is. It's something I picked up in New York. I wear kimonos quite a lot, so obviously I think this collection was one of those that straight away it walked out and I was like, yeah, it's beautiful. But I love a kind of fresh take on it. I mean, this is much more classic, but in recent years, things like Visvim doing very kind of a clean neckline and that kind of like that kind of shape and tie cord to a front of a garment. And I think, when this walked, it felt very similar. But I mean, it was, they were definitely much more like the samurai. The padded quilting felt like, protective samurai fighting gear and kind of things like that. But
yeah.
like
the wooden sword
with
fight.
With the big padded front.
You see, for me, because that's what I liked about the last collection. It had so much you know, this relates, I guess, in a weird way. Everybody talks about how he doesn't have seasons, but this relates to me to the last spring, summer. And then autumn, winter, what I really liked was it seemed quite structured and like there were solid pieces and I'm just being a little bit conservative here and also just trying to throw a spanner in the works a bit. But I mean, does all this sort of, you know, lack of sort of structure, looseness, you know, is that going to be problematic for people, or do you think it not matters?
I think a lot of the styling contributes a greater feeling of that than what's necessarily presented there. I mean, of course, those large jackets are going to be these kind of enormous enveloping pieces, but there were a lot of, as I said before, like very clean, long shirts, and I think a lot of things are worn open and tied here, but there's kind of like peignoir robe coats and simple trousers that are just pleated around the waistband or wrapped across the body, which will be actually quite cool, sort of summer, almost
because I'd get a little bit anxious with all these ties. I'd feel a bit, I don't know, undressed.
Well, it's all great layering as well. I mean, the show format is all about the model and the skin and showing the purest part of it, but I guess people are going to wear those with t-shirts underneath and with
no, I mean, I think
jackets and things. So
I think it's great because it feels very new. It doesn't feel, you know, a few people have been saying we need something new.
It feels very aware of what came before it. That's what I like about it. It feels like it knows its references.
Right.
You know, it feels like it's, you know, like we've mentioned like Helmut and Yoji and things like that, and it feels like it's aware of that, but that's, you know, like you say, it feels new. Like, yes, this did happen, but I'm aware of that, so I want to create something that isn't that, but, you know, kind of has the kind of essence of that, you know?
Well, I guess they were the last designers. That was the last epoch in menswear where people weren't referencing youth culture directly. You know, where the design was being designed for design's sake rather than, you know, a sort of subcultural fantasy, which I love. You know, that's I love that. But
this was more about breakthrough and fantasy, for sure. I think he created a really serene moment as well with the choice of music that he used, which was a very contemporary, beautiful classical track.
What was it?
Which I don't know.
Was it vocal or instrumental? Or?
It was instrumental, but he actually followed up with, I think it was Enya for the finale, which was
love Enya,
which was a little bit more, which was obviously a little bit lighter, but they came out looking like completely pure, which was really refreshing when everybody is heading towards like complete sort of rock and roll anarchy, I guess, at the moment.
It's funny that you said pure, because like when I first saw those first white looks, that's what I got from it. It was like purity.
Incredibly serene, and like as I mentioned before, like very surgical at the same time, like scrubs. They could be a bit almost psychiatric ward straight jackets and this kind of thing, except very free, very loose, all opened up and sliced up.
I mean, because like that look number 9 for me, it's probably the most conventional, so it's like the one that I feel safest with. Like, it's the one that I can imagine, you know.
See, I think as ever, there's always super wearable pieces in Craig's collections. You know, like we say when stuff walks out and it has the big sculptural stuff on, and then look how much of Craig's stuff has been worn around London at a minute. You know, like the tie-dye shirts and the shorts and the jumpers, and you know, there's like, if you look through the collection as much as you, like you say, styling wise, it has been, you know, opened up much more. There's like beautiful cut shirts and, you know, kind of, and the same with trousers, and it's, at the end of the day, the basis is fantastic tailoring. It's knowing how to cut.
Yeah. And do you think this is what, you know, is this, sorry to repeat myself, but is this what we need? Like, we need this design-driven moment now as a, you know, I hate that phrase palette cleanser, but in terms of fashion on a general bigger field, it feels like it's really nice to have somebody sort of designing from design.
I mean, I think it probably just fits into a different school than a lot of what his peers are showing here, and that might be quite difficult to place in London. But if you look at a greater context, I mean, I think he does completely still fit in a lot of current designers, and I think that you could see within that, I mean, definite sort of things like even bits of what Rick does, Demiadoma for sure, and perhaps quite a few others in Paris that, and I feel like in Japan too.
I feel like Rick and
today.
I'll pick you back up on that. But I feel like Rick and even Damir, you know, all those big houses, they become product. You have to, you know, I love what Rick does, but it's become a product, whereas this hasn't yet, which is nice. But who were you saying in Japan?
No one in particular, but okay. I mean, I think just in general, the spirit is still there, and it's that kind of dress which is still quite current, and I think you do see people wearing these kind of things. I mean, even Dries has played with certain elements of this kind of dress from time to time, and I mean, 2 springs ago he was also doing sort of these fencing tops and trousers over trousers, and it's very com as well. I mean, a lot of those pieces I think make sense in the context as one of their younger children in a way. Yeah. In the same way that for women, Simone Rocha sort of has that same much more pronounced femininity, but those same kind of large shapes and over-pronounced frills and sort of the exaggeration of one side of things, which is one of the best things that young designers are doing now, is taking one specific route of a wider school and sort of pushing that. When we talk about that lack of newness, at least we can filter well.
And you guys, Rob, I think it might have been you mentioned erogenous zones. You said there was new erogenous zones.
That was me.
Oh, was it you? Sorry. Because you know, I can't see any ass, but like.
Would you want it?
Always.
Always, okay.
So like, yeah, just wondered where I mean, how exciting new erogenous zones. Tell me about that.
I was just thinking mostly about those keyhole tops where he's kind of, I mean, it's quite strange to show this one slit of a man's abdomen, which we'll see again flicking through, and he's got little holes poked out of the top of the tricep, and these kind of, that's quite unusual, I find, and I have not seen him do tight jersey tees before either, so interesting to see that that's kind of how he chose to do that. It almost reminds me a little bit of what Roman Kramer would do as well, in terms of that bodycon kind of menswear feeling. So they were quite an unusual part of the show for me.
I think when we say about, you know, things like Damir and Rick and things like that, I think that the excitement comes from Craig. Like they have such a style. You know, like it's you know what's coming with it. As much as it changes every season, like I think the excitement with Craig is the fact that it's a rumble. Like you can feel this is so different to, you know, the previous few man shows that he's done. You know, when, like we said, it walked out and there was no print, and we were like, oh god. And it's it feels like there's so much potential from, you know, having seen three collections now, 4 collections, 3 at Man and first solo, so you know they have a definite tone to them, but there are so many different directions that he could go in. You know, he could have just taken the print thing and just done it season after season, you know. And when this walked out, you know, so many people have said to me in the last couple of days, the excitement for Craig's show was just. It was ridiculous. It was kind of, everyone was like, couldn't wait to see what he would produce, you know. And I think even if he had walked out a different set of coloured tie-dyes or, you know, something like that, people would have loved it, you know. And he walked it out and people were like, shit, it's not. There's just so much potential in the directions that it could go.
And there's a lot of variety, even though we can skim over it and there is a very, very defined large silhouette. It's interesting to see he played with the bottoms and the tops of each look so diligently, and there's a lot of variety in the trousers as well as in the shirts and the jackets. And I mean, for example, if we're looking at another sort of London hotspot at the moment. My one criticism of Jonathan Anderson's show yesterday was the fact that he does so many great things with the outerwear and the tops and everything, but it's nearly always on the exact same trouser. So he doesn't propose much of a trouser offering. It's just kind of one straight slack, and that's fine, and it gives a kind of continuity. But Craig has shown that he, as a commercial designer, can offer to buyers as well, like at least 5 or 6 different trouser ideas in the mix. So I think that's important for him going forward.
Sorry, go on. I was just going to say, do you remember when Ator Fruit did he did like the whole trouser exhibition, and that was amazing to see somebody do, like, I think he did like 20 like sort of totally different designs.
Pushing that to the limit.
And Matt, I just wondered, because since you're here and just to go off a little bit on Craig Green talks about communities a lot, and obviously you do Bin Trill, and communities are a big part of your sort of take on fashion. I'm fanboying out with a Bin Trill wristband from the party last night.
Nice.
And I just wondered, why do you think that's important to fashion? The sort of idea of community and the idea of... Yeah,
I think anyone, when you first fall in love with fashion, for me it's almost like a smoke signal when you're a kid to find like-minded people to come towards you. You know what I mean? So it's like what's on the inside of you projecting out to others, and community, fashion has always brought community to me, all my friends, from music to fashion. It's just important, and we all, look out for each other, and it's important to belong. But
because he talks a lot about the idea of family, sort of the St. Martin's family, and then I think even the family at Man, and now...
everyone you work with, you went to St. Martin's with, and everybody comes up together.
It's a community, and we move forward as one. I think that's the exciting thing, and it's definitely kind of a generational thing, and I think it definitely pans kind of probably, it kind of moves in kind of 6, 7, 8 year movements where people, they were like, slightly older or slightly younger, but it definitely feels like there's a community that moves forward together. I'm sure, and
that's why I think it's important to work with peers that are your same age and at the same level in your career, just to come up together. You know what I mean? And in the past, it's been
because he's very talkative about his team as well, and I think that's interesting. Is it the same? I don't get the feeling that it's the same in Paris. Like in London, it is very, it does feel like. I feel like
Paris is a bit of a city you come to from other places too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There is like a community there of Parisians for sure, but a lot of designers like Jeremy Scott, he was just like, I'm going to Paris and I'm going to be a fashion designer. You know what I mean? Yeah. And there's people that just do that. You know what I mean? Or you're a transplant like Nicola or Kim, where you're there, or Alexander Wang, and you're there working, but you still feel like a foreigner. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I guess there's also a language barrier for a lot of people there, coming to show from other places, and that does still exist. And I think
Rick still doesn't speak French.
Obviously everybody, everybody gets around in English, and it's fine. But I've learned over living in Paris for 4 years that there is a huge difference between friendship groups and various working situations when you can break through into their language. And there are absolutely little tribes in Paris that sort of circulate around certain groups of stylists that work with specific PRs and specific photographers, and they absolutely exist, but it doesn't have anything to do with the fashion schools in the same way that it does here. I think it's much more related to established designers and to houses, and you can see things like Ricardo has his group, and Nicolas Guesquière as well. Indeed, everybody moves around their Sahedi Slimane. Everyone who has a studio and has their team, they move along with them, just like Jürgen Teller and Marie-Amélie moved to moved to Vuitton with Nicolas, and as did Paris, who does his design identity. I mean, there are those absolutely existing machines of communities there too, but I guess they're maybe on a less less of a hybrid level, whereas I don't think people there will be so often attending their friends' shows, for example. Like, a few people do it, but not very often. You'll sometimes see perhaps like Albert Albaz and Lucas Ossendriver sitting at Heider Ackermann, for example, or
Alaya goes to Saint Laurent shows.
Alaya will go to quite a few shows, but he's also someone that sits outside of the system, and he could do that. But otherwise, it's quite segregated, and people are quite guarded. But here, I think you see, for example, at Craig's show and at Sibling this morning, you'll see all the other designers coming and sort of upping their mates, and that's a very British thing, I suppose.
That was what was really nice at the luncheon for Craig, was really seeing, and Nick and I spoke about it a bit, like a community, like a fashion community in London, and how everybody was like supporting each other, and shops like Machine A, like being a place for all these young designers and students, collections to be exhibited and be available for purchase. And London has this great community of talented young designers that aren't like fighting over the same bone. They're all like trying to uplift each other, which is great.
Would you say that there's a New York equivalent to that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like my crew is more like, Hood by Air. That was something that's kind of a more recent, New York fashion scene that's completely separate from what had been in New York before, and it was. It's the same kind of community.
That seemed to be a totally new.
Yeah, it was like we had, obviously like Shane and everyone, they were doing it long before I came around, but like they embraced me like family, and we work on a lot of projects together, but it was its own, they, like Shane started Ghetto Gothic with Venus, and it had its own club night, and then the t-shirts, and he was doing shows like all on his own friend group, and his own muses of his best friends, which were like all insular. It was his own world, which is really cool.
What seems interesting though, that was quite consciously a uniform or it was quite consciously setting out a tribe, whereas Craig isn't. He's I'm sort of interested, when first, I remember when I first saw Hood by Air, and straight away I was able to be transported to that world and was like excited about it. Whereas with this, I really like it, but I don't know who it's for. Maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe the people change because they're going to buy it. You were right. You were saying that loads of people are already buying it. I just wondered, who's it for?
Yeah. One thing I was going to ask you earlier about, what do you think the importance is of designers keeping like a through line evolution from season to season for like customers to know that they can, like for Rick, you can always like go buy a version of, a Rick drop crotch pant, or like a certain dress or jersey piece, or a skinny jean that is an evolution of like what you were able to purchase the season before. And whether the show reflected some of those pieces or not, in the styling, but when you like see it on the rack, like it has, a through line. Do you feel like it's important for designers to have that, or is it okay to be completely different from a commercial standpoint? You know what I mean?
I don't know about commercial, but I think it's really disappointing, isn't it, when you like fall in love with
something and then it's never,
and it's not there anymore. Like like Kim's that the Kim thing that you've revived is a perfect example. There's so many designers where you're like, I wish I could still get that piece. You're talking about Raf.
Yeah. Like all those Raf seasons. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's pieces
that people hunt so hard for.
I mean, I'm sure there'd be a lot of business to be done.
Or heady YSL.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, imagine if they just redid Helmut Lang from the 90s. You know, like they could just sell that. Like
well, it's really cool. Yoji does a sub-brand called Regulation, if you've ever seen it. Mm-hmm. And it's just clothes that he wears. and it's only sold in his store. It's an own label, and it's exclusively for like his shop. And I bought a piece yesterday, and that's just so cool. Like, I think more brands should just do that, you know?
Yeah.
Helmut Lang should just do that, you know?
Yeah.
I think there's a big divide between what a designer wants to do and what their commercial team will tell them to do, because so many designers will say that they do not want to look back, and they're always pushing for the new, and they don't want to wear something from their own previous seasons. Like the other day, Chris Van Ash told me that he's always one season ahead. Like why would he wear one of his suit jackets from 3 seasons ago when he should be wearing the one he's just designed for the next season? Because that would be saying that he's looking back at his own work that was better than what it is, and he hopes that he's always getting better. Mm-hmm. And I think that is kind of a bit of the problem. And I mean, there's some people that do it so super well, and Rick is one of them, that, you know, this kind of production line of jersey singlets and everything else goes behind what he does on the runway. But a lot of young designers, and Craig perhaps could be one of them, doesn't have the breadth or the sort of the assets to be able to run those things at the same time.
Of course.
So it's a dilemma that crosses from very commercial to young avant-garde designers. And in the end, yeah, and maybe would be amazing to reissue all of Helmut, but again, there is a collectible capacity to all of those things.
I was going to say, if you reissued it, people would still want the original.
But there's also something precious about the ephemeral nature of fashion. We can't just keep making the same thing over and over again either.
Yeah.
But then, you know, I mean, I don't know when this sofa was made, but, you know, if you look at Mies van der Rohe furniture, or there's a market for the original, and there's a huge market for the, or look at
Seditionary's clothes.
Yeah.
I buy the Boy London versions, because those are the ones that aren't falling apart.
Yeah.
But that's another thing. Like Helmut as well. In that time, Helmut was also not disposable, but it wasn't made to luxury standards either.
Yeah,
it wasn't luxury expensive.
Like we shot some Helmut Lang Moon pants for the Bintro lookbook that's going to come out in like a week.
Nice.
And they were like sticking together, and like the silver was like peeling off, and I was just like, oh, I almost had like white gloves, like making sure that like nothing got broken. But they still made an amazing image like in the camera. And that was one thing I wanted to say about Craig's sculptural pieces. Like from the beginning of fashion photography, you know, having these shapes that can make a strong image in a fashion photograph is so important. If you look at like, you know, Avedon images, or Edward Steichen, like those shapes, it's so important and beautiful, and it kind of like speaks to creating the world of fashion, you know. Like Philip Tracy's hats, like all of that, you know, they're not necessarily functional. They, you know, women just wear them for the Kentucky Derby once a year, and then never wear that hat again. But that moment and that image that was made is amazing. You know, that's kind of what it's for. You know.
Sure, we can see a lot of these pieces completely transformed into incredible editorial by great photographers and great stylists, hopefully soon.
And that element of art direction is totally part of what you want from fashion and need.
Yeah, like the back of not to keep like referencing, but like the In Tribe members with the sculptural thing reminds me a lot of the Teenage Riot RAF image with that flag.
The flag.
You know what I mean? And that also that kind of procession, Anton Corbijn-esque, you know, vibe. And that RAF image, Teenage Riot with a flag, that's one of like the most iconic images for me, you know what I mean?
In menswear, yeah.
I think,
and it's not even of clothing.
I think maybe as well it relates to, you know, the idea of him as a craftsman and as a maker, and you know, there's the interview that Lou did with him for Show Studio, where he's talking about how it's basically in his blood. His dad, I think was a carpenter, I can't quite remember, apologies. But his dad always worked with his hands, and I think, you know, again, I love all these graphic designers that are fashion designers, but he's coming from the point of view of somebody who's about what he can do with his hands, and so maybe part of the sculptural thing is also showing that these are art pieces that you're wearing. You know, I think maybe it relates to that.
And I think one of the nicest parts of this show compared to the others is that the way that he moved it behind the silhouette instead of in front of it, because I don't personally have a huge problem with it, but there is something quite, in a way, controversial about covering the face in a fashion show, and it becomes quite violent, it becomes quite oppressive. But the way he did it by turning things around this time was actually quite beautifully framing the boys' faces with these kind of incredible sails behind it. It almost looked like, you know, this beautiful backdrop of an image with a soft fabric behind it and this kind of makeshift frame. So I quite liked that this became much more romantic and less aggressive.
Yeah. It's more like childlike, like a game of capture the flag or something like that.
Yeah, like they're gonna put it on the top of a sandcastle or something afterwards.
Good. Do we have? Ooh. So, this is our celebrity question. Always a good moment. So you were talking about. I think Astrid was there on Saturday?
Astrid was there. Yeah, she was there last night too.
So Astrid being wonderfully supportive.
Astrid Anderson.
Sorry, I'm being very.
She's
lovely.
amazing.
She said that Craig is her favourite designer. Oh, that's very nice. Her question is, should someone like Craig's work in seasons? What is it?
Should someone like Craig work in seasons?
Yes. Thank you for correcting my grammar. Should someone like Craig work in seasons? Yeah.
I don't think so.
No.
Seasons don't really matter anymore to me, because you can't buy a winter coat when it's cold.
Yeah.
We're all very confused, let's be honest. I mean,
it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, you can never buy like shorts when you go on holiday.
I think, and what we've said, you know, discussing this collection, you know, it's one of those things that it's maybe not about seasonals, it's about a wardrobe. It's about having fantastic pieces that you can wear in the summer, you can wear in the winter, you know. I think it's not about this is summer, this is, you know, the statement piece for this season. I think it's about, you know, like what you say about like buying Helmut and things like that. Like you buy them because you want them in your wardrobe, you know. It's about kind of curating your own, and I think that he certainly lends to this. You know, he's creating pieces that you don't just want in your wardrobe for a season, you want for 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah, I think it's really like a documentation of time too, like documenting this moment in fashion, this moment in London. This is what he was feeling, this is what was important, rather than it being, you know, commercially focused or like have anything to do with seasons or functionality.
I think the fun point now is that it shouldn't be about commerciality, as you know, like we say about like Rick has these certain things that you can buy. Like, let them at this point have the freedom to do what the hell they want, you know, like, and then once you've done a couple of seasons, you're like, okay, cool, like I'm noticing that here's one of my signature shapes, or here's something that like I like doing every season and it fits into my collection every season. It's not about starting from the outset and being like, these are the t-shirts I'm going to make, these are the trousers I'm going to make, you know. It's kind of, it's so nice that there can be that freedom at this point, which I suppose is the excitement of it.
Well, Charlie Porter was saying that he does sell like everything that goes, you know, that everything sells out almost instantly, and that Craig Green does.
What store is he from?
Well, Charlie Porter's a writer.
Oh, okay.
So, but yeah, because I was just wondering, is this self-sustaining, this huge collection for such a young designer?
I think it depends in what direction he wants to go, and we can't place that on him. But I mean, I think he's at a point where, like you said, he could become one of those designers like perhaps Aitor Thrup or Carol Christian Powell, and in a sense Alaya, who kind of put out their collections when they're ready and have this cult following that follows them and are willing to buy into that sort of non-seasonal, non-system way of working, and which makes them so special and makes them so cult in a way. But on the other hand, maybe that's not what he wants to do. Maybe he wants to become a more commercial designer, and in a way where he is now, he could almost become, for example, London's new reference of deconstructed kind of layered menswear, and
like a Paul
in a way
Hart,
there's
Paul Hart
yeah,
or something
and
like that.
there is something in what he's doing that it is a system. It's clothing that could have its much more easy declinations, and then he could turn it into a brand that really makes sense alongside the Yogis and the Under Mullimeesters and the Margellas.
Would the stores allow somebody to not do seasons, or would they just be unable?
That's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, those designers, like I think Paul Harnden, like Boris Bejan Sabari. I think he does seasons though, but Alaya doesn't do seasons, and Christian Carol Poel. But those are some of my favorite designers. It's ready when it's ready, you know, like.
And people like you respect that.
Yeah.
But stores find
it really difficult, you know. I find the same thing with
sell.
image making, or like doing a fashion film, or like an image. Like, if you don't, especially if you don't have any money to like pay an editor to do it, and they're doing it on their own time, it takes like a month, 4 weeks is like a normal amount of time, working every day to have like something worth showing anybody. And when people have these unrealistic turnarounds, you know, sometimes Nick will spend a year, or like that Kate film that came out, that was from like 2.5 years ago. You know, regardless of how much got done over those 2 years, it took 2 years to have it be worth putting out. And at the end of the day, no one remembers the time before it came out. They just remember what it existed thereon. So like, why ever put out anything that's shit? I don't really want to work in seasons if things aren't ready. You know, I like if someone is just like, oh, it's not ready. Like Sean, he's like, I'm going to show in Women's Week. Yeah. That's when my idea is going to be ready.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
We were talking like literally, Sean does this thing. Samson, does this thing where he shows winter in summer and summer in winter, because seasons don't exist in California. It's just always warm. So literally, like we were saying, like what we showed yesterday, like the heavy wools and things like that, and then which was spring summer, and then for autumn winter it was short shorts and thigh high socks, and people quite often ask Sean about this, and it's one of the, and like I once said to him, I was like, you do this hilarious thing where like for spring summer you seem to be drawn to wools, and for autumn winter you go the exact opposite way. And he was like, well, I just design what feels right at the time. Like, it's what fits to the collection. And I think that's, you know, if you can just take that really chilled out and then work it out as to what's going to go in store for the seasons, then you can make it fit. But, you know, like we say, like, no one knows what's going on with the weather, especially in London. California's always warm. Like, I think, you know, what you were saying earlier about, like, in New York and the communities in New York, I think the idea of that as well, like, you know, Craig pulling in Asia, like, you know, like the Hood by Air community in New York, and like what we've got community-wise in London, I think that they're all moving closer together, you know, and they're all becoming this thing where, you know, a couple of the Hood by Air guys said to me, you know, when they came to London, and they were like, we're so welcomed here, you know, and they're so like the community just like come straight in, you know, like, and you know, it's the same when we go out to New York and things like that, and it's kind of that whole idea of these communities, although they're like closed, you know, they appear to be very closed. I think it's very nice that, you know, they embrace each other, which kind of like makes like the communities come together. Like, yeah, I think.
Can I ask a question though? Do you think that just buying these clothes and wearing Hood by Air and wearing these brands makes somebody a part of that community, really? Because I have a little trouble at the moment with the way that people feel that they, you know, are buying into these tribal ideas, if it's a Givenchy t-shirt, if it's a pair of Rick Owens sneakers, and what they think that they're actually
I think we were
becoming
talking
part of.
more about like the designer,
like
and
the
the art
community
director,
of
and
the
like,
team.
Like, you know, Sean's team is like
Sure.
you, Matthew Joseph's, Sean and his sister. So like those 4 people.
Sure, but that's all well and good, and that's almost like the figurehead of each of these kind of tribes. But I'm just interested in general. If someone goes into Selfridges and wants to buy a Hood by Air T-shirt for £200, and what do you think? I mean, I have a real I feel it's a huge disconnect between what people think. What do you think they're buying into it because they like the music that's behind it, and do you think they know about Venus's club nights and all that kind of thing? I feel like there's a huge.
No, they don't. But
what do you think attracts them to it?
I think that attracts them is that they see a rapper that they like wearing it, or one of their friends wearing it, or it's a big, colorful graphic. I remember we did a project in Shanghai, Shane and I, and I just shot this like tranny film for him where he was like voguing in different wigs, and they were expensive wigs. We paid a lot of money for them, and he like used it as like a hat for like a month. He didn't take it off. This like blonde wig that looked like my hair, and we went to Shanghai, and he was just wearing that and like wearing a skirt with like a Hood by Air shirt, and the Chinese press were like, so how long have you been transvestite? And then like all these kids are wearing Hood by Air shirts, but like a lot of them don't even know that the designer's gay, even or cross dresses that does Hood by Air. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter. I think that's how it is. Like another great example is, Marc Jacobs. People just know Marc Jacobs from being at like, the mall or whatever at some store.
T-shirts with Kate Moss and key rings.
And key rings and like fun, kitschy, but they don't.
I think it's degrees.
Know that
I think it's degrees. I think I think that you have your inner circle. You have the people. Like there will be a couple of thousand people that have met Shane. Right? So that's like one circle. And then you'll have the people that are the friends of all of those people who think that they're the cool guys. And then you start to get outside of that.
To a consumer somehow in the end.
But I think that you're always buying into a circle with anything, because you're always symbolizing, hey, I'm into this. I mean, that's what grandmas did.
But no one really cares about all the details that we do unless it's like, this is like our world. Fashion's like what we love. You know what I mean? Like, but if you're just a person that likes clothing, you're just going into the store to find something cool for the night. Yeah. It's what you like. I would say like most people don't know the story or care. They're just buying a garment.
I disagree massively.
Depends what kind of customer.
Really?
I disagree.
There's two customers today. There's the super informed customer, and then there's the rich customer that doesn't have any idea.
But there's also, I think you're absolutely right. And I think when we were talking
they're both very relevant.
Jeremy Scott yesterday, I think a lot of it is the rich person, but also with Jeremy Scott and definitely with Hood by Air, and I think definitely one of the things with people like Craig Green and British designers, is that there's a lot of people consuming fashion that don't buy it. They're consuming it as a culture, they're consuming it to repost. Bean Trill is all about that. It's people knowing everything about what you guys do and believing in it and following it and talking about it and debating it. And, just in the same way as I think for our age group, definitely, in the 90s for me, it's exactly the same as pop music. I was never going to be a singer in a band, but I had a billion opinions on what Oasis's album should be like, or and I think I think there's more. I remember talking to brands a few years ago and saying, look, the Lady Gaga generation, for them, stylists, they know the name of stylists, they know the names of art directors, they know the name. It's not a niche culture anymore.
Yeah, I guess just like how Rihanna's Instagram gets deleted and suddenly Mel Ottenberg is the new Instagram star for her.
Yeah. Well, that was like the big thing, when I was creative directing Gaga, was like, she was a platform to inform kids about art, about culture, like having like Terrence Coe do those projects with us. Some person in Minnesota found out about Terrence Coe and then went to the Perez Project website and then learned all about like Dan Colin and Dash Snow, and it's about, having for me at that time, having the highest platform to project out great information. And it's great that you, without me saying that you felt that kids do know that, because I do think they know art directors' names now, like designers'
It's a giant
names.
window into niche culture.
And it's also easy to be informed about that with like the internet or, Show Studio, like things like this live stream right now. Whereas when we were kids, you found out about it through, ordering magazines in the mail.
Later. Yeah.
Like, well, also, I mean, fashion's a really obvious way of selling it. I've probably said this a billion times on these panels, so I apologize. But like, fashion's a really obvious way of selling any idea, because you're putting a person in the idea. You're attaching it to a walking. So whatever it is that's going on in Craig Green's head, because I'm seeing it in a person, I'm immediately thinking, who is this person? What do they think? What do they do? What do they dance to? How do they make love? Like everything. Like I'm just, who are their friends? And because you're selling it's not like designing a table. A table doesn't have personality, and you can't fancy it. But a fashion designer, you
need to be seduced.
Well, yeah, and there's a person, there's a people, and if it, and consumerism surely based on friendship through cash.
But that becomes a much more difficult part of what Craig's selling, as opposed to say Hood Bayer and things like this that have that kind of real gang culture of cool personalities behind it, etc., because this is a very design-based
and I think that's what's fresh about it.
And it's going to be attractive to people that have that side of things that interests them, and not so much a pop cultural edge to it. So I think that, particularly through the silhouettes here, we also, maybe this collection is a little less masculine than the ones of the last 2 or 3, because of so much of this softer layering and the open jackets and shirts, and also of course those tight tees. So perhaps this is going to be a bit more of an androgynous kind of feeling. I could also see a lot of these clothes on women. So I think that's interesting for him. It's the first time I would say that. Before, we talked about such a boxy square look, all these large knits and sort of heavy. But
I see so many girls wearing
fringing, and
even
exactly.
that,
you're right.
Those knits, like I see girls wearing them as dresses quite often, But I think the excitement for me seeing things like this is maybe it's an art director's eye. I'm sure you see it in the same way. My excitement is that seeing it on the catwalk, but then thinking about how it will be interpreted over the next 6 months, how different stylists will deal with it, how different photographers will deal with it, how, I think sometimes looks come onto the catwalk and they can very much only be shot as the full look. And I like seeing when a collection comes out and you're like, how will that be broken up? How will it be worn with the things in a real wardrobe? How will people wear it on the street? How will it be photographed? How, could it transcend into pop culture? How would varying musicians wear it? If it was going into that pop cultural direction, it's kind of, it becomes a very, like you say about like Rihanna,
it gets
and things
let
like
go
that.
into the
how it's like it's that, and then it just goes out. Like it's the ripple effect. It's like you want to see how much further it can go and how people interpret it. And
exactly, I'd love to see this probably mixed up with more traditional menswear pieces, and like see one of those tops underneath a suit, or perhaps even some of those amazing jackets could find their way onto the pages of Italian Vogue by one of the incredible stylists who actually has an eye out on London or something like that, the same way that Jonathan's pieces sit so well on the pages of a really high fashion magazine like that. There's not so many younger London designers that have made that transition into the European magazines quite so well as him, but I could see things in Craig's catwalk absolutely.
Definitely.
Sitting in a Mizell photo or
I do. I always had this
you only see Issey Miyake and Craig Green. art puzzle.
Yeah, but I always have that little fantasy in my head of like being like a restaurant with like Julian Schnabel in like 1983 in New York in like black yoji. Like that's always playing somewhere in the back of my
best.
head.
So it was just there, just right there.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll see the new generation in Craig Green instead.
Yeah. So like, yeah, I'm gonna sell some $1 million art in some black Craig Green. So Matt, closing comment.
It's a wonderful show and inspiring, and it's so great to see, a designer putting clothes like this down the runway.
Fantastic. Dan?
My closing comment is that Lou Stoppard was sitting next to me in tears from this show. So she was very, very proud, and I guess a lot of other people were too, so congratulations, Craig.
There was a lot of talk of tears.
A fantastic collection. I want to wear it, and I can't wait to see how far the ripple goes.
Fantastic. Thank you, guys. That was actually really was a fantastic panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.